in the area of dealing with the post-harvest produce and the subsequent distribution. And we haven't thought creatively about how to make these cooperatives not just, something nice you're doing for a bunch of women out there as a welfare measure, but to make them really strong, competitive, viable market enterprises, which is what they're meant to be. So I think we have to develop the business model for cooperatives, specifically for women, recognizing the context and the role and so on. And we have to do that in a way that simultaneously reduces the drudgery and arduousness of the work, but also increases the value added of that work. Now, this is a complex thing because we are talking about a world in which more and more of this is now being taken over by large chains. Agriculture is one of the areas that is getting vertically concentrated more rapidly than possibly any other area that I can think of. So it's not just that there are the big 5 companies globally that are engaged in marketing and in input delivery, but that they are also vertically integrated. And that means also that increasingly we're moving to large-scale systems for this rather than small-scale. The trouble is that we have not seen an integration of the small with the large. What we've really seen is a displacement. The large comes in there and throws out employment. We've seen this in sub-Saharan Africa big time. We have seen that as you get the large retailers or the large producers, you move more into a plantation mode, which is often called contract farming rather than plantation, but it's really the same thing. You move into that, and you move into mechanized processes, mechanized processing and distribution, which of course displaces a lot of labor, but really leaves smallholder cultivation at a tremendous disadvantage. Now we have to counter this. I believe the only way to counter it is through cooperatives, because that will also give you those advantages of economies of scale. That will also give you access to both credit and technology and markets in a way that you would not have as an individual smallholder. But those cooperatives have to recognize the huge role played by the women. So once again, away from the household orientation, away from one person from every household, go directly to the people engaged in that process and make cooperatives from them or composed of them and so on. So that's, if you like, the aspect of invisibility. Then there is the aspect of consumption. Now here too, we have a very complicated world. We are experiencing changes in patterns of food consumption that I think are almost unprecedented. And a large part of that is because of the growth of multinational food supply. Multinational corporations' role in food supply. I'm not trying to make out that there are these big bad creatures out there who are swallowing everybody up and so on. But what I do, I think, want to point out is that the growth of, ICT, of course, which has dramatically spread the possibilities of advertising, the demonstration effect of particular food patterns in the north permeating across developing countries, and the spread of large multinational retail, especially in the food sector, has created some major dislocations. It has created a dislocation between the local producer and the local consumer. I was in Estonia recently, and they have very fine beef, farms and so on. But they cannot access the local beef because everything has been taken over by multinationals. That beef goes somewhere else. In their supermarkets, they get beef coming from everywhere else in the world. And so you dislocate between local production and consumption. Secondly, you dislocate between local habits of food, which are often very much more, shall we say, responsive to climate, to your own physical characteristics, because some parts of the world have been lactose resistant or something or the other, which are much more, shall we say, suited to particular populations. You shift from that to one homogeneous pattern of food production. And people will accuse me of being extreme because it's true. I mean that, let's say McDonald's, when they come to India, they can't serve beef. So they serve these chicken burgers and so on. But shall we say broadly, the certain kind of food production is now widespread across the world. And that has massive implications because it has led to different kinds of morbidity and disease which are completely unexpected. Perhaps you may know, for example, Papua New Guinea, the explosion of, cholesterol-related diseases, because suddenly they're eating all the fatty parts of meats and sausages and things which they really were not used to eating traditionally. In South Africa, you have, among the poorer families, malnutrition and obesity in the same household, because of the fact that you have really wonky patterns of food consumption. In South Asia, in Bangladesh and parts of India, workers are substituting the consumption of biscuits, which are processed white flour-based, etc., for the traditional breads that they would make at home, because those are labor-saving and quick, and they don't really have the time because they have to do all these other things, which has huge health implications. How does this play out for women? There is a significant increase, which we do not realize, a significant increase in reproductive health diseases, which are resulting, according to many doctors, from hormonal changes resulting from diet change. And somehow we don't think about this in the developing world, Shall we say, I'm in the land of the fast, slow food movement. And the things that you now talk about, think about, and are very conscious of, we are so far from appreciating these in the developing world. And we are so quickly losing the advantages we had in terms of local, seasonally oriented produce, healthy, natural, organic produce. We have lost all of those. We are moving towards a much more chemically based, non-seasonal, not just carbon intensive, but unhealthy diet, which is driven by these consumption patterns, which in turn are driven by the marketing and advertising of large companies. This has very big implications because it leads to peculiar forms of malnourishment. It's not only undernutrition. Sometimes it's poor nutrition which comes from a different kind of too much nutrition. And we again have to bear in mind that if you want to look at these in terms of how they play out, you have to think about how specifically you can target women who still remain the basic provisioners of consumption in the household, and ensure that there is a different set of choices available, which is not seen as wildly expensive, which is not seen as the luxury of the elite, but is seen as something desirable. We have some very nutritious food staples in India, some food grains, which ragi, jowar, bajra, which are, I suppose at some point they will become the quinoa of the West, okay? They're really good for you in many different ways. They lower your cholesterol, your blood pressure, you name it. Now, this used to be the traditional staple of many poor families across Central and North India. But if you like, the advertising revolution has made everybody think that these are inferior food grain, and what you should really be having is wheat and rice. And so now, even when they serve these in the schools, the mothers come and say, no, you're giving my child inferior food. You give them wheat and rice. Don't give them this inferior staple. So we have to also deal with that aspect of the food system. I want to mention this aspect of reversal. It's very painful for me to even think about it because it's one of those horrible realities you hope to shut out. But I think we have to recognize many of us grew up with the idea that things will keep getting better. Maybe a little sideways and maybe a step back, but then 3 steps forward. But overall, things improve is how we somehow thought of the world. We now have to recognize that it doesn't necessarily work that way. And recently, especially, there have been huge setbacks for women's empowerment across the world. It's not just in terms of education, how much harder it is today if you are a rural woman in Afghanistan to educate your daughter, or in Pakistan, or in Iraq, where some of the most educated women I knew, nuclear physicists and so on, are unable to educate their own daughters. But also in terms of the basic functioning of women in all of the other aspects that we've been talking about, the unpaid labor aspects. Even in my own country, in India, there's a reversal in terms of the recognized work participation. It's moved back to within the household. They've gone from paid to unpaid work. And this is true across a number of countries. What do you do in these such situations? How do we cope with this possibility of reversal? How do we, when in our interventions, try and put in the seeds of change that will not get destroyed either by, shall we say, patriarchal reaction or by social political changes that, not just threaten security, physical security, but also dramatically reduce the possibilities of empowerment. Now, this one I don't have an answer. I really don't. But I think it's a huge challenge, and I think we will be living in a fool's paradise if we don't accept this. That even in countries that seem quite fine and safe and good and democratic and so on, things can change. And they can change very rapidly. I mean, my friends in Egypt have got horrible stories. And it comes from both sides. It comes from the Muslim Brotherhood and from the army. So I think we have to recognize the possibilities of reversal. And so when we go around thinking of policy interventions or pilot projects, programs, all the things that we like to think about, we have to bear in mind that these have to be tough. They have to be not invincible, of course, but at least resilient in terms of coping with possible and often dramatic and sharp changes in the social political environment, which are unexpected for all of us, and which certainly we don't like, but we still have to live with. So, a Saudi woman I know described it to me very well. You know how they have so many restrictions on their mobility. She says, you have to be like a fish swimming in the water. You swim around the big fish, and you swim in particular ways that allow you to survive. I think that's maybe how we have to think about the world today. It's not a hopeful, it's not the big, let the revolution come and everything be wonderful. It's not that. But it is surviving in a world in which that survival has become more difficult for a lot of women. So, okay, I'm sorry, I've talked for too long, but let me then end with a couple of questions that I have for you. I would be interested in knowing, how do you feel that some of the shall we say, donor strategies or policies that your resources have assisted, have they inadvertently actually worsened problems sometimes? Or could they have, in the absence of not recognizing some of these things that I've been talking about? Second, supposing you actually did have to change for the better, recognizing cultural contexts, then what would you do? It's not just enough to educate women. In fact, in India, we now realize it's really educating the men. I mean, really educating them, not just putting them through school. But how do you do that? How would you ensure, if you like, the social cultural change that is essential if you want to actually genuinely enable a viable set of food systems that recognizes the contribution of women? Third, how would you actually go about reducing it? I've mentioned some ideas I had in terms of reducing unpaid labor, increasing access, and so on and so forth, but these are very tough questions and they're culturally specific. So how would you do it? And finally, that last question, how do you ensure survival of positive interventions? How do you make sure that the institutions are put in place, or that people's minds have changed, or that approaches are now so widely recognized that they cannot be just overrun by a political change? These are very tough questions, but then you're all working in this area and you know much more about it than I do. So let me end here. Thank you.